Many of you will recall, just 9 short, glorious months ago, the GNOME Foundation hired a professional shaman to be their new executive director, like you do. Well, of course, flash forward 9 months to today, and the GNOME Shaman is no longer the executive director. She's out. They've got a new interim director coming in. Total pandemonium. I've got an article I'm going to read to you now that covers this, but man, do I have a lot more to say on the topic. Bear with me here. The GNOME Foundation has announced that their executive director will be departing, their words, after only 9 months on the job. Now, why the short tenure of the GNOME Foundation's shaman? I should also point out that they dropped this news on a Friday afternoon, which means that they wanted to bury this story. That's what you do when you're in PR and marketing and you want to bury a story. You drop it on a Friday afternoon in the hopes that no one picks it up, and the few people that do pick it up and write stories about it will probably not be seen all that much. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are the slow news days in the tech business world, so this story got mostly buried. But we're still talking about it. All right, let me continue here. The departing executive director, Holly Million, was hired to lead the GNOME Foundation in October of 2023, 9 months ago, leaving behind her career as a, quote, professional shaman and producer of flavored shaman water. During her 9-month tenure at the helm, she guided GNOME down a path of continued financial ruin and avoided any interaction with tech journalists. Million's only known accomplishment as executive director is the creation of a GNOME 5-year strategic plan, consisting primarily of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the goal of eventually producing a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to dive into this just very, very briefly here because this is a fascinating story. The GNOME Foundation was without any executive director leadership for quite some time. They had a big vacancy at their most senior level of the foundation. When they finally filled that role, the person that they hired was Holly Million, a professional shaman. Now, I want to be clear about this. When I laughingly refer to her as the GNOME Shaman, I'm not attempting to make fun of her religion here, because the shaman thing was not her religion. I went in depth on this. I'll link over to the articles as well. This was a career for her, and she was not religiously into shamanism. She didn't seem to know much about shamanism. She simply decided that shaman was a good fit for her as a title, right? So when Holly Million, the GNOME Shaman, was hired, both Holly and GNOME went into lockdown mode. They began deleting everything. She had a website called hollytheshamanartist.com. Everything about that site, everything went private. Her Facebook account had tons of videos and posts about shamanistic teachings and shaman clearings and video Zoom shaman cleaning sessions and all sorts of stuff. Started getting deleted left and right. Her Instagram account went private. Just basically they started scrubbing the internet, right, of everything. Now, luckily, a lot of it was archived on archive.org, so I grabbed a lot of it. I'm going to read a little bit of some of that to you now so you can kind of get a flavor for this. This is from Holly Million's website before she took it offline. My name is Holly Million. I am a professional shaman, an artist, an herbal medicine maker, and a micro homesteader. 8 years ago, I realized the best word to describe me must be shaman. A shaman is a bridge between the material and spiritual worlds, between the seen and unseen worlds. I am now a professional shaman. That's not like an edited quote from her. That's just me copying part of her website. I am planning to write a series of books, 2 of which are now works in progress. Okay. She also sold spiritual herbs and did virtual shaman services. The most fascinating one to me was that she provided a service to people, paid, of course, where she would teach you how to become a professional shaman like her. It was a She would teach you how to become a door-to-door shaman salesman or something like that. But what was amazing about all of this was how quickly everything got locked down. And it wasn't just that they began locking everything down, deleting everything about it, and her group shaman services and everything else, and her unlocking of magical, mystical mysteries and whatnot. And it was that the GNOME Foundation, let me see, I think I have this here. The GNOME Foundation began shaman shaming, right? So the GNOME Foundation themselves, who spend most of their time talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. That seems to be their primary motivating goal, not software, not computers, etc., but diversity, equity, inclusion. They actually began censoring anyone who even used the word shaman. They began shaman shaming. Why would you, as a foundation that was heavily promoting diversity and inclusivity and everything else, hire a person whose primary internet presence, right? Most of her presence on the internet was about her being a shaman. 90%. Websites and Instagram, Facebook, everything. It was all of her YouTube channel where she showed you how she made her shaman water and sold it to people. Like, it was about being a shaman. Why would you then silence anyone talking about that? Why would you then make it so it was basically a crime in the GNOME community to mention her being a shaman, right? Like, I'm fine with her being a shaman. In fact, I was totally cool with her being a shaman. I thought it was just whimsical and awesome. It's a little funny to me. Yes, I'll admit that. It's funny. But on the same token, it doesn't really have a direct impact necessarily on whether or not she would do a good job as executive director. And this is the point I made at the time. This was a fun, whimsical bit of news. I even invited Holly on the show repeatedly. Total dead silence. I invited people from the GNOME Foundation on the show to do written interviews, to just talk to me, to provide quotes or comment to me. Total dead silence. They went into total lockdown mode, and it went so far as to, let me see if I can show you this here. They began suspending people. My account, many other journalists, one journalist, and many other people asking questions. But anyone who used the word shaman in the GNOME Foundation's forums got banned, got their comments and questions deleted, and they were banned. They literally, this is how the GNOME Foundation works. When they have an announcement, they post the announcement in their forum and they invite people to ask questions about it. And this includes press. They're not good about responding to email. They never have been. And so this is how they ask questions. Anyone who mentioned the word shaman, oh, does this have any bearing on her hiring? How does Holly Million feel like her experience as a professional shaman and shamanistic healer impact how she will lead the GNOME Foundation? I mean, these are fair questions. How was your previous role relevant to your current role, right? Those are the questions. Every single one got deleted rapidly. And they never respond. Basically, they shaman shamed. It was wild. It was crazy. It was absolutely insane. And over the course of the 9 months that Miss Million was at the helm of the GNOME Foundation, we then found out how she was going to perform. During those 9 months, basically nothing got done except the creation of a 5-year plan. Now, okay, that's pretty exciting, right? A 5-year plan. And I went into this in depth. Again, I'll link to this wherever you're getting this podcast. And the GNOME Foundation's 5-year plan, despite having taken 9 months to create, could have been written in a short, mildly intoxicated afternoon. It is poorly written, incredibly short, light on details to an extreme degree, with almost no measurable goals whatsoever, and an extreme focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in fact, one of the only major goals that you can find in this 5-year plan is, I kid you not, I kid you not. Where's this? Do I have the PowerPoint thing up here? They wanted to eventually have a PowerPoint slide. Where is this here? Yeah. They wanted to tell people about how they had successes and put it on their website. They hadn't done it, but they wanted to think about doing it. And then they wanted to create, I don't have it up here, but you can find it. Oh yeah, here it is. Document and claim in writing through a case for support and slide deck what we have already accomplished. Okay, to start with, that is one of the worst sentences ever. I'm going to read it to you again because this literally took 9 months for them to create this sentence. Document and claim in writing through a case for support and slide deck what we have already accomplished. In other words, if you jumble that mass of poorly strung together words together, they wanted to create a slide deck. What? That took them over half a year to create that sentence, which says someday they're going to create a slide deck. And so this was their accomplishments, right? The foundation was in dire financial straits. Let me see if I can show you a chart here. Well, here's not do I have the chart? No, I've got the numbers up though. In 2021, let's see, where is it? They lost $640,000. In 2022, they lost almost $300,000, and we have no idea for 2023 yet. But it wasn't looking good. In fact, the whole organization had to go into a financial freeze earlier this year under Holly Million's leadership, where they can do no new spending, and they basically are like, as they put it, they hit the buffers. So they've gotten to a point where they're losing so much money and bringing in so little money that they just simply can't keep spending. They are financially frozen because if they don't, they're going to go bankrupt. That happened earlier this year, and now, well, there we go. The shaman is out. I should keep reading to you here because this is fascinating. The new interim director, Richard Litauer, I don't know how to pronounce your name, man, will be transitioned into the role over the remainder of the month of July. Quote, "I'm very proud of what I have accomplished in my time with GNOME," stated Holly Million. She goes on to say, "And I am dedicated to working with Richard through a transition to ensure that everything I have been working on is handed off smoothly, that I will be pursuing a PhD in psychology and dedicating myself to my own private practice." End quote. Now, here's the thing. The wording of that entire announcement avoids stating who decided on this course of action. We know that she's leaving the GNOME Foundation. And what she will be doing afterwards. She'll be going into psychology and be going into a private practice, assumedly as a psychologist. I don't know if she's done being a shaman or if she's going to be a shaman. I don't know how that works. But we don't know why she's leaving. Now, it would be reasonable to assume that, considering the short notice of all this, right? They made this announcement on a Friday. They have very little transitionary period, which is unusual. It would be reasonable to assume that she got fired because her performance was terrible, right? I mean, it's objectively, financially, the foundation is doing poorly. Their 5-year plan is extraordinarily funny. It's almost bad SNL sketch level bad. Like it's poorly thought out. It's not actionable. It doesn't do anything to lead the foundation towards financial viability going forward. And so it's reasonable to assume, okay, she failed at her core mission. So she's fired. Did they fire her? I don't know. I would hope that the GNOME Foundation board would fire her. However, there has absolutely been no statement of anything other than, oh my gosh, Holly Million is the best thing since sliced bread. She brings so much diversity, equity, and inclusion into the GNOME Foundation. It's great. Those are the only statements we have coming out of the GNOME Foundation. So, including from all the board members. So what's the reality? We really don't know. She might have left because, honestly, if you were in her shoes and you were previously a professional shaman and you got into this executive director position at the GNOME Foundation, and a few months in, you're like, wow, I don't know anything about Linux or GNOME. This isn't really my cup of tea. I do diversity, equity, inclusion stuff. And then She's probably was feeling pretty stressed out, and she probably wanted to bail and go do something that was more in line with what she does, right? So her quitting or her being fired seems both reasonable. Again, I reached out. I reached out to GNOME. I reached out to Holly Million. I reached out to all sorts of people. No responses from the GNOME Foundation, which is extraordinarily normal for them. They are an incredibly secretive organization in that they do not talk to journalists, especially critical journalists. If a journalist like me, who historically has praised the GNOME Foundation. If you go back and look over my articles and shows, I've praised their finances in the past. I've praised their actions and their work. And I've talked to people running the GNOME Foundation on my shows in the past, and it's been extraordinarily glowingly praiseful of them. But I've been critical of them lately because they've been screwing up so much. But because I'm being critical of them, they will not speak to me because they are, at least currently, an incredibly juvenile organization. They ban, block, mute, and silence anyone who disagrees with them at all or says anything that they even remotely don't like. This is happening in their forums, people who contact them via email, whatever. This is how they roll now. And so it is not surprising that they simply haven't gotten back to me. They won't get back to me. Not ever. I don't know what their future holds for the GNOME Foundation, but it doesn't look good. Let's talk about that briefly here. So Richard Littauer, I got to learn how to pronounce. Don't take it personally, Richard. I don't know how to pronounce people's names. Littauer. Don't know how to pronounce that. Sorry, buddy. So he's going to be the interim executive director, and we don't know who's going to fill that role permanently, though. According to the announcement, the board will meet next week to set up a search plan for a permanent executive director, which will be announced after GWADEC, their big GNOME conference, their GNOME user and developer conference, July 19th through the 24th, right? So that's happening a little less than a week from now, just a couple of days from now. And supposedly, they're going to announce the plan for their new executive director then. My gut tells me it's probably going to be Richard Littauer, who is their interim executive director, because the GNOME Foundation has gone extended periods of time without having an executive director at all. Why would they go through the effort to hire an interim executive director to simply serve for a few weeks to a few months? What? After having created supposedly a 5-year plan that they're all on board with. Well, if they really are all on board with their 5-year plan, and it's such a great, detailed, actionable 5-year plan, they can survive without their executive director for a few months, if history is any indicating factor here. So they would not have hired an interim director if they didn't think this particular guy would be their full-time executive director, but maybe they needed to get buy-in from some more people first or go through a more formal process. So they made him interim executive director before they make him the official one. That would be my guess. That would be absolutely my guess. But here's the thing. Richard, if he becomes the executive director, or whoever else takes that role, is going to be inheriting a foundation in very dire financial circumstances. They are bleeding money nonstop. And what's crazy is it would be incredibly simple to raise more than enough money to put the GNOME Foundation into the positive on a quarterly and yearly basis, simply by going to the major corporations that utilize GNOME's software as a core part of their multi-million-dollar, if not multi-billion-dollar businesses. Red Hat Enterprise Linux uses GNOME. Go to IBM and Red Hat. Boom, done. GNOME is in the black. I'm sorry. This is just absolutely viable. SUSE, Canonical, and Ubuntu. The list goes on and on. Oracle. These companies have money, and GNOME is a vital part of their shipping enterprise business strategy. You go to them and you say, look, we want to make things better for you. Let's strike some sort of a sponsorship deal. Boom, you're in the black. Easy. The fact that this hasn't been done is gross negligence on the entire GNOME Foundation's board of directors and every executive director they've had since they went into the negative, including Holly Million. And so it should be easy to fix for even their interim executive director. But will they? Who knows? And what will they do with this 5-year plan? This 5-year plan is nonsense. It's nonsense gobbledygook. It's all about diversity and equity inclusion, which, last I checked, is not a path to profitability. It's fine. It's fine. If you as a corporation want to go down the DEI, let's open ourselves up to getting sued like IBM and Red Hat path, go nuts. Go nuts. That's got a track record now of... DEI means you must discriminate against people. That's part of diversity, equity, and inclusion, is that you discriminate against some people so that you can take from some people and give to some other people. That's how DEI policies work. This isn't a knock on DEI or saying it's great or anything like that. It's just saying this is the practical application here. If you're going to go in and say that this group, right, needs to have more, and you take away from another group, let's say from one skin color to another skin color, from one gender to another gender, and you take away from one to give to another simply based on those immutable characteristics, you are by definition, both the dictionary and legally, both in all 50 states as well as the federal government, you are discriminating. So you open yourself up to lawsuits, very easy lawsuits. That's why we see lawsuits going against Red Hat and IBM right now from past employees, from the government themselves, and those have only just begun. If the GNOME Foundation really wants to open themselves up to massive, massive lawsuits, which they cannot afford to fight or pay out at all because they're losing money hand over fist, well, I guess that's up to them. But if my personal recommendation here would be scrap that 5-year plan. I know you spent half a year working tirelessly on that one page of poorly strung together words that could have been done by a drunken monkey in an afternoon. I know you worked hard on it. Get rid of it. It's garbage. It's going to hurt you long term, and it doesn't lead you to being financially profitable, which I know you're a nonprofit. Nonprofits still have to turn a profit. You still have to not lose money every month. If you don't have money to pay for the people that work for you, it doesn't matter if you classify yourself as a for-profit or a nonprofit, you still can't pay the people to work for you. This is how it works. Get rid of that 5-year plan. Make Richard the permanent executive director. He seems far more qualified than Holly Million, the GNOME Shaman, did. Go for it. Start talking with the corporations that utilize GNOME, both the desktop environment and many of the individual software packages made by GNOME under the GNOME umbrella, which there are many. Go to them, work with them on sponsorship opportunities, work with them in detail on that, and get yourself into the black. This is not hard. This should be able to be done within 1 month. I guarantee you, 100% guaranteed, if you came to me and said, Lunduk, you're our interim executive director for 1 month, I would be there for 30 days. I would end that 30 days. GNOME Foundation would be profitable and in the black. And I could come up with I'll come up with a 10-year plan. I'll come up with a 100-year plan. And I guarantee you, I would spend more than 3 hours drunkenly in an afternoon creating it. And it would not include anything that would get the GNOME Foundation sued off of the face of the earth. So this shouldn't be hard. This is not tricky. This is something that anyone who's done any sort of leadership work within the tech world should be able to hit out of the park. You are keyed up for massive success. If you don't have massive success based on what you have available over the next 30 to 60 days, you are fundamentally and profoundly failing. Every GNOME developer, GNOME community member, every company that relies on GNOME, you are failing. I'm just saying that flat out. It should be easy. Easy. But will you guys contact me? Will you follow the simple steps that I've outlined right here? No, you won't. The GNOME Foundation won't. Why? Because I'm critical of them, and I'm known publicly to not have the correct politics. Therefore, they simply will ignore me and lead themselves on a continued path towards financial ruin. But that's just my personal guess on the matter. Never mind the fact that I've been 100% correct every step of the way. Every single step of the way. Man, after I started talking about the GNOME Shaman getting hired 9 months ago, I got yelled at. I got blocked. I got censored. I got criticized. People screamed about how wrong I was. Did I turn out to be correct in my assumptions and my guesses and my assessments of the situation? 100%. Will all the people, including people who run GNOME, apologize or admit at least, oh yeah, Lunduk got it right again? No, they won't. Also notice that over the last 9 months, I have done more to push the GNOME Foundation and have them get things done than the executive director did. This is a real thing. I made a point. I put it in an article in a show about how GNOME had not been publishing their annual reports. They had not been publishing it. They were late. Under the GNOME Shaman, they didn't get their necessary stuff published. I did not see all their details. I did not see their financial reports. And they're a nonprofit. They need to get those out on a regular schedule. They were late doing so. We had no idea what their finances looked like. Only after I created a rather big stink about it and caused many in the GNOME community to start screaming and yelling about it, did they quickly put some together. And literally, their annual report that they put together, because I forced them to, was quick and slapdash and poorly thought out. But they did it, which means that over the last 9 months, I've had a bigger influence on the GNOME Foundation actually getting things done than the executive director or any of the members of the GNOME board of directors. You're welcome, GNOME community. Feels pretty good. Now we'll see. Will the GNOME Foundation follow me on the rest of my my suggestions? I don't think so. But if they did, that would be good for GNOME. It would be good for Linux, and it would continue to inflate my already massive ego. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.